I was standing in my kitchen pouring coffee when I heard the rumble of heavy machinery coming up my driveway. And when I looked out the window, my stomach dropped at the sight of a full excavator rolling onto my property like it owned the place. I lived on a 10-acre plot in Scottsdale, Arizona, out where the desert met carefully planned communities. My house sat on the northern edge of the Saguaro Heights development, a collection of expensive homes governed by one of those HOAs that seemed to think they owned every blade of grass within a 5-mile radius. I had bought my land years before most of the development went up, which meant I was grandfathered into certain rights that the HOA hated. My property technically fell under their jurisdiction for minor aesthetic rules, but the land itself was mine, fully and completely. The excavator was bright yellow, impossible to miss, and behind it came a dump truck and a crew of 4 guys in hard hats. I set my coffee down so hard it sloshed onto the counter and headed straight for the front door. By the time I got outside, they were already setting up near the eastern fence line, about 50 feet from my house. The morning air was cool, typical for March in Arizona, and the desert landscape stretched out in every direction with saguaro cacti standing like silent witnesses to whatever was about to happen. "Hey!" I shouted, jogging across the gravel. "What the hell are you doing?" One of the workers, a middle-aged guy with a clipboard, turned to face me. "We're here to dig a drainage trench, HOA project." "On my property?" I looked at the stakes they had already driven into the ground, marking out a line that cut diagonally across my land from the southeast corner toward the northwest. "Who authorized this?" The guy consulted his clipboard. "We got the work order from Saguaro Heights HOA. They said the land was part of the common area easement." "That's absolutely not true." I pulled out my phone. "This is private property. You need to stop right now." The excavator operator had already started the engine, and the noise was deafening. The guy with the clipboard shrugged. "Look, man, we're just contractors. We go where we're told. You got a problem? Take it up with the HOA." "I'm taking it up with you. Get off my land." He gave me a look that said he dealt with angry homeowners every day, and none of it fazed him. "We got permits and authorization. Unless you got something in writing that says we can't be here, we're doing our job." I called the HOA office right there on the spot. The phone rang 4 times before someone picked up. "Saguaro Heights, HOA. This is Deborah speaking." "Deborah, this is Marcus Chen. There's a crew on my property right now claiming you sent them to dig a trench across my land. What's going on?" There was a pause, and then I heard the sound of papers shuffling. "Oh yes, Mr. Chen. That would be the Drainage Improvement Project. We sent a notice about this 3 weeks ago." "I never got any notice, and even if I did, you can't just send people onto my private property without permission?" "Actually, Mr. Chen, according to the CC and Rs you signed when you agreed to join the HOA, we have the right to access any property within the development for necessary improvements and maintenance." My jaw clenched. "I didn't agree to join your HOA. My property was here first. I'm grandfathered in, and I own this land outright. Our records show that you're part of Saguaro Heights, and as such, you're subject to our rules and regulations." Her voice had taken on that particular tone of smug authority that I had come to associate with HOA board members. "If you have concerns, you can file a formal complaint and present it at the next board meeting on the 15th of next month." Next month? They're digging up my land right now. The project has been approved by the board and is moving forward on schedule. Have a nice day, Mr. Chen. She hung up. I stood there staring at my phone while the excavator roared to life and began lowering its bucket toward my land. The scrape of metal on dirt filled the air as the operator took the first scoop, tearing up desert soil and native plants that had been there longer than any of us. I did the only thing I could think of. I called my attorney. Robert Williamson had handled my property purchase and a few business contracts over the years. He was in his 50s, sharp as a tack, and had a reputation for not backing down from a fight. His secretary put me through immediately when I told her it was an emergency. "Marcus, what's wrong?" I explained the situation as quickly as I could while watching the excavator take another massive bite out of my land. "They're literally digging right now, Robert. They won't stop." "Did they show you any permits or easement documents?" "The contractor has a work order from the HOA. That's it," I heard him typing on his keyboard. "Okay, I'm looking at your property records right now. You purchased that land in 2019, correct? Before the HOA was even established. Right. The development went up around me over the next few years. And did you ever sign any CC and Rs or HOA agreements? Never. I refused every time they asked. More typing. Marcus, I need you to tell the contractors to stop immediately. Film everything. Get their company name, the names of the workers if you can. I'm going to make some calls and I'll call you back in 10 minutes. I switched my phone to video mode and started recording. The excavator was now carving a trench about 3 feet deep, and the operator was moving steadily along the marked line, dirt and rocks piled up on either side. Excuse me, I called out to the clipboard guy again. What company are you with? Southwest Earthworks, he said without looking up from his phone. And your name? Why do you need my name? Because you're trespassing on my property and I'm documenting everything. That got his attention. He looked at me, then at my phone. We're not trespassing. We have authorization. From an HOA that has no jurisdiction over my land. So yeah, you're trespassing, and if you don't stop right now, you're going to be named in a lawsuit. The operator must have heard some of this because he slowed down, looking over at the clipboard guy uncertainly. They had a brief conversation I couldn't hear over the engine noise, and then the operator shut off the excavator. The sudden silence was almost jarring. Look, the clipboard guy said, walking over to me. We don't want trouble. We're just doing a job. But our contract says we dig this trench today, and if we don't get paid. That's between you and the HOA, but I'm telling you right now, you do not have permission to be on this property. My phone rang. Robert. Marcus, I just spoke with the county recorder's office and confirmed what I thought. Your property is not subject to the HOA's CC and Rs. You never signed anything, and the development was built after your purchase. They have absolutely no legal right to access your land without your permission. That's what I told them. Good. Now here's what's going to happen. I'm drafting an emergency complaint right now to file in federal court. This is a clear violation of your property rights under the 4th and 5th Amendments, and we're going to argue civil rights violations under Section 1983. I'm also going to get you a temporary restraining order. Federal court? I had expected maybe small claims or county court. Marcus, they're seizing your property without due process. This isn't just an HOA being annoying. This is a constitutional violation. We're going big on this one. I should have the complaint ready to file within the hour. An hour? Robert, they've already dug up probably 50 feet of my land. I know, and every inch of it strengthens our case. Document everything, photos, video, measurements. Get the names of everyone involved. I'll call you when I'm heading to the courthouse. He hung up and I turned back to the contractors. They had all gathered in a small group, clearly discussing what to do. The excavator sat silent, its bucket still full of Arizona dirt. I walked over to them. Gentlemen, I just spoke with my attorney. He's filing a federal lawsuit today, and every single one of you is going to be named if you continue. Southwest Earthworks will be named. The HOA will be named. This is your chance to pack up and leave before this gets worse. The clipboard guy pulled out his own phone. I need to call my boss. You do that. While he made his call, I walked along the trench they had already dug. It was roughly 3 feet deep and 2 feet wide, cutting a harsh line across the natural desert landscape. They had torn up several creosote bushes and a small Palo Verde tree. I took photos from every angle, making sure to capture the damage clearly. The guy finished his call and came back over. My boss says we have a valid contract with the HOA, and we're going to continue working until we get official legal documentation telling us to stop. You're making a mistake. Maybe, but it's not my mistake to make. I just work here. The excavator roared back to life. I called Robert again. They won't stop. They're continuing to dig. Okay, change of plans. I'm calling the police. This is criminal trespassing now. Stay on the line. I could hear him making another call, talking to someone at the Scottsdale Police Department. Within minutes, he was back. Officers are on their way. Just wait. Don't engage with the contractors anymore. I stood there, watching the excavator tear up my land, feeling completely powerless. The trench was now probably 80 feet long and getting longer every minute. The dump truck had moved into position to start hauling away the excess dirt. 15 minutes later, 2 Scottsdale PD cruisers came up my driveway, lights flashing. The excavator stopped again. 2 officers got out and I walked over to meet them. Thank you for coming. I'm Marcus Chen, this is my property, and these contractors are trespassing. The older officer, whose nameplate read Gonzalez, nodded. We got a call about a property dispute. What's the situation? I explained everything as concisely as I could. The HOA, the contractors, my attorney's involvement. While I talked, the younger officer, Officer Martinez, went over to speak with the Southwest Earthworks crew. Do you have documentation proving this is your property? Gonzalez asked. Absolutely. I have my deed in the house. Give me 2 minutes. I ran inside and grabbed the folder I kept with all my important property documents. The deed was right on top, along with the survey map and my title insurance policy. I brought it all out to Officer Gonzalez. He looked through it carefully, then walked over to where Officer Martinez was talking with the contractors. They had a conversation I couldn't quite hear, but I saw the clipboard guy shaking his head and pointing at his work order. Finally, both officers came back to me. Mr. Chen, based on the documentation you've shown me, this is your private property. Unless these contractors can show us an easement agreement or court order giving them access, they're trespassing. Can you make them leave? We can, but I want to give them one more chance to provide documentation. He turned toward the crew. Does anyone have an easement agreement, a court order, or written permission from Mr. Chen to be on this property? The clipboard guy held up his work order. We have this from the HOA. That's not sufficient. Unless the HOA has a legal easement across this property, they can't authorize you to be here. I'd have to contact the HOA to get that information. Officer Gonzalez checked his watch. You have 10 minutes. After that, if you can't produce the proper documentation, you need to pack up and leave or we'll cite you for trespassing. The clipboard guy got on his phone again, this time clearly frustrated. I could hear him saying legal easement and property rights and police are here. After a few minutes, he held out his phone. The HOA president wants to talk to the officers. Gonzalez took the phone. This is Officer Gonzalez, Scottsdale PD. Who am I speaking with? A pause. Madam, I understand you authorized this work, but the property owner is stating that you don't have permission to be on this land. Do you have a recorded easement? Another pause, longer this time. An HOA agreement isn't the same as an easement, madam. If Mr. Chen never signed your CC and Rs, then you don't have authority over his property. Her voice was getting louder now. I could hear it even though the phone wasn't on speaker. Madam, I'm going to need you to calm down. Your contractors have 10 minutes to provide proper documentation or they need to leave. He handed the phone back to the contractor. The 10 minutes crawled by. The contractors stood around looking uncomfortable while Officer Gonzalez filled out some paperwork and Officer Martinez walked the perimeter of the trench, taking his own photos. Finally, Gonzalez said, "Time's up. Gentlemen, you need to pack up your equipment and leave this property." What about the trench? The clipboard guy asked. We're just supposed to leave it like this? That's between you, the HOA, and Mr. Chen, but you can't continue working here. It took another 20 minutes for them to load up the excavator and secure everything on the trailer. The whole time, I stood with the officers, documenting everything. Before they left, I got the name of every worker and took photos of the company logo on their trucks. As Southwest Earthworks pulled away, Officer Gonzalez turned to me. Mr. Chen, this is really a civil matter between you and the HOA, but the trespassing part is resolved for now. I'd recommend getting a restraining order to prevent them from coming back. My attorney is already working on it. Good. We'll file a report about this incident. If they come back without permission, call us immediately and we can arrest them for criminal trespassing. After the police left, I stood alone in my front yard staring at the ugly scar across my land. The trench ran for about 120 feet, destroying native vegetation and leaving piles of dirt everywhere. I took more photos and measurements, then called Robert back. The police got them to leave, but the damage is done. I know, and we're going to make them pay for every bit of it. Marcus, I'm at the courthouse right now. The complaint is filed. We're suing the HOA board members individually, and Southwest Earthworks. I'm asking for injunctive relief, compensatory damages, punitive damages, and attorney's fees. We filed in the District of Arizona, Phoenix Division. What happens now? Now we wait for a hearing on the temporary restraining order. I put in an emergency request, so we should get a date within a few days. In the meantime, I'm going to send a cease and desist letter to the HOA and to Southwest Earthworks. If either of them sets foot on your property again, we add criminal charges." That evening, I couldn't stop thinking about the trench. I went out after sunset and stood looking at it in the fading light. It looked even worse than I remembered, a brutal gash across land I had carefully maintained for years. The next morning, I woke up to find an email from the HOA. It was from someone named Patricia Donovan, HOA president, and the subject line read, "Violation Notice." I opened it with a sense of dread. "Dear Mr. Chen, it has come to our attention that you interfered with authorized HOA contractors performing necessary drainage work on community property. Per Section 7.3 of the Saguaro Heights CC and RS, obstruction of HOA business is a violation subject to fines of up to $500 per day. Additionally, you have failed to maintain your property in accordance with community standards as evidenced by the incomplete drainage trench now marring the landscape. You are hereby notified that you are in violation and will be fined accordingly. The trench must be completed or filled and landscaped to community standards within 14 days, or additional fines will be assessed. You have the right to appeal this violation at the next board meeting on April 15, 2026. Sincerely, Patricia Donovan, HOA President, Saguaro Heights." I read it twice to make sure I was understanding correctly. They had dug an illegal trench across my property, I had stopped them, and now they were fining me for it. I forwarded the email to Robert with a single line. "Are they serious?" He called me 5 minutes later, and he was laughing. Actually laughing. "Marcus, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen an HOA do, and I've seen a lot of dumb things. They just gave us evidence of ongoing harassment and abuse of authority. This is perfect for our case." "They're fining me $500 a day, Robert." "They're trying to. Don't pay a penny. In fact, I want you to respond to this email and formally deny their jurisdiction over your property. Keep it short and professional. I'll send you the language to use." 10 minutes later, I received an email from Robert with a template. I copied it and sent it to Patricia Donovan. "Ms. Donovan, I am in receipt of your email dated March 19, 2026. I formally deny that Saguaro Heights HOA has any jurisdiction over my property located at 4721 East Desert Vista Road, Scottsdale, Arizona, 85262. I never signed the CC and Rs for your association, and my property was purchased prior to the establishment of Saguaro Heights HOA. Your contractors trespassed on my property without permission and caused significant damage. I have filed a federal lawsuit regarding this matter, case number CV2600847 PHXDJH, U.S. District Court, District of Arizona. Any further contact regarding HOA violations or fines will be considered harassment and will be added to the ongoing litigation. Please direct all future communications to my attorney, Robert Williamson, at the following address." I added Robert's contact information and hit send. The response came back in less than an hour. "Mr. Chen, your property is located within the boundaries of Saguaro Heights and therefore falls under our jurisdiction regardless of when you purchased it or whether you personally signed the CC and Rs. The regulations apply to the land itself, not individual owners. Your lawsuit is frivolous and will be dismissed. The fines stand, and if you continue to obstruct HOA business, we will pursue all available legal remedies, including foreclosure on your property for unpaid fines. This is your final warning, Patricia Donovan." Foreclosure. She had actually threatened to foreclose on my property. I called Robert immediately. "Did you see her response?" "I'm reading it right now. Marcus, she's making this so much easier for us. Threatening foreclosure over fines you don't legally owe? That's abusive process. That's intentional infliction of emotional distress. That's possibly even extortion. I'm adding claims to the complaint. Can she actually foreclose?" "Not legally, no, but HOAs try it all the time, and sometimes they get away with it if people don't fight back. But you're fighting back, and you have me, and we have documentation of everything. She's not taking your house." Over the next few days, things escalated rapidly. The HOA sent me a formal notice of lien against my property for $1,200 in fines. Robert filed an amended complaint, adding the lien as evidence of further harassment. We got a hearing date for the temporary restraining order, March 26th, just 1 week away. But before the hearing could happen, I woke up on March 24th to the sound of machinery again. I looked out my window and felt my blood pressure spike. Southwest Earthworks was back, and they had brought more equipment this time. 2 excavators, another dump truck, and a crew of at least 6 people. I grabbed my phone and started recording as I ran outside. "What are you doing? The police told you to leave." The clipboard guy from before wasn't there. Instead, a different man, younger and more aggressive looking, came toward me. "We have a court order authorizing this work." "Let me see it." "I don't have to show you anything. Get out of the way or we'll move you." "That's assault. I'm calling the police right now." I dialed 911 while the excavator started up. The noise was overwhelming, and I had to shout into the phone to explain what was happening. The dispatcher said officers were on the way, but this crew wasn't waiting around. They started digging immediately, extending the existing trench and starting a new branch that headed toward my western fence line. They were working fast, clearly trying to get as much done as possible before anyone could stop them. I filmed everything, moving around to capture every angle while staying well clear of the equipment. The new guy kept watching me, but didn't try to stop me from filming. 6 minutes later, Scottsdale PD arrived again. This time it was 3 cruisers, including Officer Gonzalez from before. "Mr. Chen, what's the situation?" Same as before. They came back without permission and started digging again. Gonzalez looked at the new trench work and shook his head. "Wait here." He and the other officers approached the crew. I saw the new guy pull out a piece of paper and show it to Gonzalez. They talked for several minutes while the excavators kept working. Finally, Gonzalez came back to me. "Mr. Chen, they're claiming they have a court order authorizing this work. Can you verify that?" "That's impossible. We have a hearing scheduled for the day after tomorrow. There's no way any court authorized this." "Can I see the document?" I asked Gonzalez. He walked back over and got the paper from the contractor, then brought it to me. I read it quickly and felt anger boiling in my chest. It wasn't a court order at all. It was a letter from Patricia Donovan on HOA letterhead, stating that, pursuant to the authority granted by the Saguaro Heights CC and RS and approved by the Board of Directors, Southwest Earthworks was authorized to complete necessary drainage improvements on community property. I showed it to Officer Gonzalez. "This isn't a court order. This is just a letter from the HOA president." He read it, and his expression hardened. "Yeah, this isn't what he said it was." He went back to the contractor, and I could see the conversation getting heated. The contractor was gesturing and raising his voice, but Gonzalez wasn't backing down. Finally, Gonzalez turned and signaled to the other officers. "Gentlemen, you need to shut down the equipment and step away. You've misrepresented the nature of your authorization, and you're trespassing on private property. If you don't comply, you'll be arrested." "You can't arrest us for doing our job." "I absolutely can arrest you for trespassing and for obstruction after you lied about having a court order. Equipment off now." It took another tense few minutes, but the excavators finally shut down. The crew stood around looking angry and confused while Gonzalez called for backup. 2 more cruisers arrived, and then a sergeant showed up. They had a long discussion, reviewing all the documentation, looking at my deed, examining the fake court order from the HOA. The sergeant came over to me. "Mr. Chen, I'm Sergeant Williams. We're going to cite these contractors for trespassing and for making a false statement to police. We're also going to contact the HOA and make it very clear that if they send anyone onto your property again before your court case is resolved, we'll pursue criminal charges." "Thank you." "Do you have an attorney handling the civil side of this?" "Yes, Robert Williamson." "Good. Make sure he knows about this incident. We'll provide you with a copy of the police report." The contractors were cited and ordered to leave. This time, officers stayed until every piece of equipment was off my property. The new trench they had started was only about 30 feet long, but combined with the original trench, my land now looked like a war zone. After everyone left, I sat down on my front porch and called Robert. They came back. Southwest Earthworks came back and started digging again. They told the police they had a court order, but it was just a fake letter from the HOA president. Silence on the other end for a moment. Then, "They did what?" I explained everything that had happened. Robert listened without interrupting, and I could hear him typing rapidly. Marcus, this changes everything. Making a false statement to police, continued trespassing after being told to stop, conspiracy between the HOA and the contractors. This isn't just a civil rights case anymore. This could be criminal. The police cited them. Good, but I want to push this harder. I'm going to contact the Maricopa County Attorney's Office. What they're doing might constitute fraud, criminal trespass, and possibly even criminal damage. At minimum, we need to make sure Patricia Donovan understands she can go to jail for this. The hearing for the temporary restraining order was scheduled for March 26th at 10 in the morning at the Sandra Day O'Connor United States Courthouse in downtown Phoenix. I took the day off work and met Robert in the parking garage at 9:30. "Ready?" he asked as we walked toward the entrance. "As ready as I'll ever be." The courthouse was an imposing modern building, all glass and concrete. We went through security and took the elevator to the 8th floor. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, more businesslike than dramatic. We were scheduled before Judge David J. Hayes, a federal judge who had been on the bench for about 15 years, according to Robert. "He's fair," Robert had told me. "Doesn't suffer fools, but he follows the law." The HOA had hired a lawyer, a slick-looking guy in an expensive suit named Gerald Morrison. He sat at the defendant's table with Patricia Donovan next to him. She was exactly what I had pictured: mid-50s, bleached blonde hair, too much makeup, and an expression that suggested she smelled something unpleasant. When Judge Hayes entered, we all stood. He was a tall man with gray hair and reading glasses perched on his nose. He settled into his chair and looked over the file in front of him. "Good morning. We're here for plaintiff's motion for a temporary restraining order in Chen versus Saguaro Heights HOA. Mr. Williamson, this is your motion. Go ahead." Robert stood. "Thank you, Your Honor. This case involves a clear violation of my client's constitutional rights to due process and protection from unreasonable search and seizure. On March 18, 2026, the defendant HOA sent contractors onto Mr. Chen's private property without permission and began excavating a drainage trench. When Mr. Chen objected and called the police, the contractors initially left but returned on March 24th with false documentation claiming court authorization. The Scottsdale Police Department has cited the contractors for trespassing and making false statements to police. He walked through the timeline, submitted the police reports as exhibits, and showed the judge photos of the damage to my property. Your Honor, Mr. Chen purchased his property in 2019, before the Saguaro Heights HOA was established. He never signed the CC and RS, never agreed to join the association, and has consistently maintained that the HOA has no jurisdiction over his land. Nevertheless, the HOA has claimed authority, sent contractors to destroy his property, threatened him with fines and foreclosure, and continues to harass him. We're asking for a temporary restraining order preventing the HOA and anyone acting on their behalf from accessing Mr. Chen's property pending resolution of this case." Judge Hayes looked at the HOA's attorney. "Mr. Morrison, response?" Morrison stood, smoothing his tie. "Your Honor, the Saguaro Heights HOA is simply trying to make necessary improvements for the benefit of the entire community. The drainage project is essential to prevent flooding during monsoon season. Mr. Chen's property lies within the boundaries of the development, and as such, it's subject to the HOA's authority." "Did Mr. Chen sign the CC and RS?" "Not personally, no, but then how do you claim authority over his property?" "The CC and RS apply to the land itself, Your Honor, not just individual owners. When property is located within an HOA development, the restrictions run with the land." "Except that Mr. Chen's property predates your HOA's existence, correct?" Morrison hesitated. "That's our understanding, yes." "So how can restrictions run with land that was already privately owned before those restrictions were created?" "Your Honor, we have an easement for utility and drainage purposes across all properties in the development. Do you have a recorded easement specifically for Mr. Chen's property?" Another hesitation. "We're working on obtaining the documentation." "That's a no then." Judge Hayes looked down at the file. "Mr. Morrison, I'm looking at the police reports from both incidents. On the second occasion, Your contractors told police they had a court order when they actually had a letter from your client, Ms. Donovan. Is that correct? Patricia Donovan leaned over and whispered something urgently to Morrison. He nodded and turned back to the judge. Your Honor, there may have been a miscommunication between the HOA and the contractors about the nature of the authorization. A miscommunication that led to a false statement to police officers? Judge Hayes removed his glasses and fixed Morrison with a stern look. Counselor, I'm trying to understand why I shouldn't sanction your clients right now for what appears to be deliberate misconduct. Your Honor, the HOA was acting in good faith to complete a necessary community project. Good faith doesn't include trespassing on private property after being told to stop by both the property owner and the police. Good faith doesn't include lying to law enforcement about having court authorization. Judge Hayes put his glasses back on and wrote something on his notepad. Here's what's going to happen. I'm granting the temporary restraining order. The Saguaro Heights HOA, its board members, its contractors, and anyone acting on its behalf are prohibited from accessing Mr. Chen's property for any reason without his explicit written permission. This order is effective immediately and will remain in place pending trial or further order of this court. Patricia Donovan made a small noise of protest, but Morrison put a hand on her arm. Furthermore, Judge Hayes continued, I'm ordering the HOA to restore Mr. Chen's property to its condition before the trenching began. You have 30 days to fill in the trenches, replace destroyed vegetation, and repair any other damage. Mr. Chen and his attorney will inspect and approve the work. If this isn't completed satisfactorily within 30 days, I'll hold Ms. Donovan and the other board members in contempt. Your Honor, Morrison started, but Judge Hayes held up a hand. I'm not finished. I'm also referring this matter to the Maricopa County Attorney's Office for investigation of possible criminal conduct. Making false statements to police is a crime in Arizona, and I want a prosecutor to look at whether charges are appropriate. He looked directly at Patricia Donovan. Madam, I don't know if you understand the seriousness of what you've done. You've violated someone's constitutional rights, you've damaged their property, and you've potentially committed crimes. This isn't HOA business as usual. This is real legal jeopardy. I strongly suggest you start taking this seriously. Patricia's face had gone pale, then red, then pale again. She looked like she wanted to say something, but Morrison was clearly signaling her to stay quiet. Anything else, Mr. Williamson? Robert stood again. Just one thing, Your Honor. We'd like to request that the HOA be ordered to remove the lien they've placed on Mr. Chen's property for fines he doesn't legally owe. Judge Hayes looked at Morrison. There's a lien? Yes, Your Honor, for violations of remove it. Today, file proof of removal with the court by 5 p.m. or I'll add sanctions. Are we clear? Yes, Your Honor. Good. We're adjourned. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt like I could breathe for the first time in a week. Robert was grinning. That went about as well as it possibly could have. Hayes doesn't mess around. Do you think they'll actually restore my property? They will if they don't want to go to jail for contempt, and if they don't do it right, we'll get the court to order them to hire someone else to do it and pay for it. That afternoon, I received an email from Gerald Morrison with proof that the lien had been removed. No apology, no explanation, just the documentation. The next day, I got a call from an unknown number. Mr. Chen, this is Detective Sarah Rodriguez with the Maricopa County Attorney's Office. I've been assigned to investigate the incident involving Saguaro Heights HOA and the contractors who trespassed on your property. Do you have time to talk? I spent an hour on the phone with her, going through everything that had happened. She was thorough and professional, asking detailed questions about the timeline, the contractor's statements, and the fake court order. Mr. Chen, I'm going to be honest with you. Cases like this are tricky because there's often a lot of gray area about what the HOA believed it had authority to do. But the false statement to police, that's black and white. If the contractor told officers he had a court order when he knew he didn't, that's a crime. What happens now? I'm going to interview the contractors and get their statements. I'll also be talking to Ms. Donovan and the other HOA board members. Depending on what I find, we may file charges. Over the next week, the Saguaro Heights HOA hired a different contractor to fill in the trenches. I supervised the work personally, making sure they were doing it correctly. They brought in clean fill, compacted it properly, and restored the grade to match the surrounding land. The vegetation would take longer to replace, but at least the scars were less visible. I got regular updates from Detective Rodriguez. She had interviewed everyone involved, and the story that emerged was damning. The contractor who had claimed to have a court order admitted that Patricia Donovan had told him to say that if police showed up again. She said it was just a formality and that the HOA definitely had the right to be there, he told the detective. I didn't think it was a big deal. Patricia Donovan, for her part, denied telling anyone to lie to police, but 2 other members of the Southwest Earthworks crew corroborated the story. On April 10th, the Maricopa County Attorney's Office filed criminal charges against Patricia Donovan for solicitation to make false statements to law enforcement and criminal trespass. The news made the local papers, and the HOA community forums online exploded with gossip. The remaining members of the Saguaro Heights HOA board held an emergency meeting and voted to remove Patricia as president. They also voted to formally acknowledge that my property was not subject to their CC&Rs and to issue a public apology. The apology came in the form of a letter delivered to my house. Dear Mr. Chen, the Board of Directors of Saguaro Heights HOA wishes to formally apologize for the actions taken by former President Patricia Donovan regarding your property. We acknowledge that your land is not subject to our CC&Rs and that the HOA had no authority to access or modify your property. We deeply regret the damage caused and the distress this situation has created. We have taken steps to ensure nothing like this will happen again, including implementing new policies requiring legal review before any action affecting properties with unclear jurisdiction. We hope to maintain a positive neighborly relationship going forward. Sincerely, the Saguaro Heights HOA Board of Directors. Robert filed an amended complaint adding claims for the cost of restoration, my attorney fees, compensation for my time and stress, and punitive damages. We're going to settle this. Brr, he told me. They know they're going to lose at trial, and with criminal charges pending against their former president, they want this to go away. He was right. In early May, the HOA's insurance company reached out to negotiate a settlement. After several rounds of back and forth, we agreed on $175,000. The settlement included full payment of all my attorney fees, compensation for the property damage and restoration, payment for my time and stress, and a substantial additional amount as punishment for the HOA's conduct. The settlement also included a permanent injunction preventing the HOA from ever claiming jurisdiction over my property, and requiring them to update all their maps and documents to clearly show my land as private property not subject to their rules. I signed the settlement agreement on May 15th, exactly 2 months after the first excavator had rolled onto my property. Patricia Donovan's criminal case moved slower. She hired a defense attorney who tried to get the charges dismissed, arguing that it was all a misunderstanding. But the evidence was too strong. In June, she pleaded guilty to reduced charges and was sentenced to 2 years of probation, a $5,000 fine, and 100 hours of community service. She was also banned from serving on any HOA board in Arizona for 10 years. The civil case went to trial in September. Robert had advised me that we could push for more damages beyond the settlement with the HOA, specifically targeting Patricia Donovan personally for her harassment and misconduct. She had homeowner's insurance, but it wouldn't cover intentional acts. The trial lasted 3 days. Robert put me on the stand to describe what I had gone through, the stress of watching my property get destroyed, the fear when contractors kept coming back despite police orders to stay away. We had photos, police reports, email evidence of her threats to foreclose on my house. Patricia's attorney tried to argue that she was just doing her job as HOA president and had made honest mistakes. But the jury didn't buy it. After 4 hours of deliberation, they came back with a verdict awarding me an additional $80,000 in compensatory damages and $200,000 in punitive damages. Patricia filed for bankruptcy 6 months later. As for Southwest Earthworks, they settled separately for $50,000. Their insurance company paid it, and as part of the settlement, they agreed to implement better procedures for verifying property ownership and authorization before starting work. By the time everything was finally resolved, it was early 2027. The trenches on my property had been filled for months, and native plants were starting to grow back. I had used some of the settlement money to install better fencing and security cameras, just in case anyone got any ideas about trespassing in the future. The new HOA board actually turned out to be reasonable. The new president, a retired engineer named Tom, came by one day to introduce himself and make sure there were no hard feelings. "We're not all like Patricia," he told me. "Most of us just want to keep the neighborhood nice and help people solve problems. What she did was crazy." "I appreciate that," I said. "And for what it's worth, I have no problem with the HOA, as long as everyone understands my property is mine." "Completely understood. It's in all our records now. You won't hear from us unless you want to." I still live on that 10 acres in Scottsdale. The scars from the trenches are barely visible now, covered over by desert vegetation that doesn't care about property lines or HOA rules. I keep copies of all the court orders and settlement agreements in a fireproof safe, just in case, but I haven't needed them. Sometimes new neighbors move in and ask me if I'm part of the HOA. I tell them the story, or at least the short version, and watch their eyes get wide. Word has spread through the community, and I've become something of a legend, the guy who took on the HOA and won. A few other homeowners have reached out to me over the years, asking for advice about their own HOA disputes. I always tell them the same thing: document everything, know your rights, and don't be afraid to fight back if you're in the right. Most HOAs are reasonable, but the ones that aren't will back down fast when they realize you're serious. The federal lawsuit officially closed in March 2027, exactly 1 year after it started. Robert sent me a final accounting showing that between the HOA settlement, the Patricia Donovan verdict, and the Southwest Earthworks settlement, I had recovered just over $500,000 total. After attorney fees and costs, I netted about $320,000. I used some of it to build a small guest house on the western part of my property, right about where one of the trenches had been. It seemed fitting somehow, putting something permanent and beautiful where Patricia Donovan had tried to carve up my land without permission. I also donated $20,000 to a legal aid organization that helps homeowners fight HOA abuse. Robert sits on their board now, and he tells me they get calls every week from people dealing with situations similar to mine. Most don't end up in federal court, but knowing that there are resources available makes a difference. Looking back, I don't regret buying this land before the development went up around me. Sure, it led to a nightmare year of litigation and stress, but it also taught me that property rights still mean something in this country. You can't just bulldoze someone's land because you think you have authority. You can't threaten and harass people into submission. And when you try, there are consequences. The last time I saw Patricia Donovan was about 6 months ago. I was at the grocery store in Scottsdale and saw her in the produce section. She saw me too, and for a moment we made eye contact. I could see her deciding whether to say something, maybe apologize or make an excuse. Instead, she just turned and walked quickly in the other direction, leaving her cart behind. I finished my shopping and went home to my 10 acres, my house, my land that no HOA can touch. The sun was setting over the desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, and the saguaro cacti stood like sentinels watching over everything. That night, I sat on my porch with a beer and thought about everything that had happened. The machinery rolling onto my property, the frantic phone calls, the courtroom battles, the victory. It had been exhausting and infuriating and ultimately worth it. Because at the end of the day, this land was mine. The deed said so, the courts confirmed it, and no HOA president with an inflated sense of authority was going to change that. I raised my beer toward the filled-in trenches, barely visible in the fading light. "Thanks for the guest house, Patricia," I said to nobody in particular, and took a long drink. The desert wind picked up, carrying the scent of creosote and dust, the same smell that had been there long before any development, any HOA, any of us. It would be there long after, too, indifferent to property lines and covenants and restrictions, and somehow that felt exactly right.